Unbroken, healing through storytelling.
Hello, I am Madeleine Black, your host of the podcast show Unbroken, Healing Through Storytelling, the show where I speak to amazing people that have overcome adversity and not just bounced back in life, they have bounced forward and they are now making a difference to other people. And I'm really excited to speak to my guest today, Gian Power, because he has a company which runs with parallels with the podcast show. He also believes in the power of sharing stories. So let me tell you a little bit about him before we start our interview. He is an ex-Deutsche Bank and PwC employee and is the founder of CEO of TLC Lions, using the power of storytelling to transform workplaces globally. In 2019, he was the NatWest Great British Entrepreneur Awards and was recently featured in Forbes, Business Inside and on the Empower Ethnic Minorities Executive List. Alongside work, he sits on the board of UK's largest mental health conference, This Can Happen, and is an ambassador for Missing People charity. In 2015, an unexpected family tragedy changed Gian's life forever. When returning back to work, he saw the power of being able to share his emotions and being his full self at work, and decided to leave PwC to set up TLC Lions. Lions coming from his and his father's middle name. He has brought together 25 ordinary people with extraordinary stories globally to share real life stories and life-changing experiences at large organisations around the topics of mental health, inclusion and talent development. So, welcome to the show. Gian, how lovely to see you here. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. And sorry, that's probably the longest bio anybody's had to listen to. So
It's not actually, and I cut a paragraph out. I've had way longer, so do not worry. It's all good. So because the show is called Unbroken, I always start with the same question, which is, what does the word unbroken mean to you?
yeah, I think for me, Unbroken is, well, first it's about really understanding myself and knowing that, what my trigger points are, how I ensure I'm resilient, and I can always, as you say, bounce forward in life. So when curveballs come in, I can deal with them, but I can not only survive through them, but thrive through them. So learning to really thrive in uncertain times for me.
Absolutely. I'm just going to actually pull in my microphone, which I forgot to pull it in, but I'm sure that'd be absolutely fine. That was a good start, wasn't it? Anyway, so we can edit that bit out, don't worry. That was a very good start. So can you tell me what life was like before you were 23, growing up with your sister Emma?
Yeah, so life for me was great, to be honest. I'm half Indian by background, my dad's side, and my mum's white British, so kind of grew up in a mixed culture. But a really nice childhood. My parents had worked hard. They'd come from humble beginnings themselves, but really worked hard to give us a nice upbringing. I was born in the Midlands, and at the age of 11, my parents divorced. So I guess when we talk about curveballs and I look back, it was something that changed a lot because age 11, then I moved up to Durham. Very, very different environment. And then, yeah, after that, I set up my first company at 13. I've always loved kind of startups and the world of, being of entrepreneurship. Around that time I was 15, and then mum and dad said to me, look, can you focus on your formal education? And the company was in DVD manufacturing, not glamorous, and the niche had like died out. So I did, and I went off to university. I studied international business and German, really because I grew up in a culture where everybody spoke Punjabi, and it used to frustrate me that I couldn't speak another language, and so I was determined to be bilingual. I don't know how German and Punjabi don't really kind of flow together. But yeah, I did that, went to Deutsche Bank, and then I decided where to go next. And just before I was 23, I sat down with my dad and we thought, should I set up another company? Should I go back into the banking world? And in the end, I decided to join PwC. For many reasons. One, to get my qualification as a chartered accountant, but also, being Indian, there's often a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant.
I'm Jewish, it's the same.
Oh, yeah, right, there you go. So it's kind of like they're the streams. And so I joined that, and you asked the question, and life was great. Life was so great. I had the best girlfriend. Mum, dad were happy. Emma was great. My sister. I couldn't have knocked it. It was perfect.
And then it changed, didn't it, in May when you were 23?
It did. I joined PwC and life was so good. I was living in the city, this fast-paced life, and my dad traveled a lot for work. I was quite used to traveling around the world, and it was the 7th of May in 2015, and dad called me and he said, "Hey, I've got to go to India for work." And I said, "When are you leaving?" He said, "Tonight." And it was quite last minute, but again, business, I thought not too much of it. And I remember that because that day I went to the office, suit and tie on in the city, and I came home and dad called me from the airport. And we spoke that evening and off he flew. Now the days passed and I didn't hear from him. And again, loved one is overseas, time difference. I try not to overthink it. And this was, just normal life. Dad was overseas and about 5 days passed, 4 days, 5 days. And it was apparent nobody had heard from him. And people were contacting me. And I know my dad inside out. And I thought something is just not right. And so we just hoped, prayed he would take the return flight back to the UK as planned. It was a week trip. But I still remember the morning and the airline called and they said, "We're really sorry, he's not on the plane and it's departed." And so from that day on, I guess this was the first big change because my dad was declared missing internationally. And at 23, I found myself leading a missing persons investigation, hence why I support the charity Missing People Today. And for 4 weeks, my sister and I campaigned kind of tirelessly to try and find my dad, putting up rewards in money we didn't have and just doing everything. And after about 4 weeks, there was a glimmer of hope because the BBC reached out and they said, "Look, we've seen what's going on with your father and we have a reach in over 100 countries through the news. Do you want to come in with your sister tomorrow and stream this?" Of course, we jumped at the opportunity, and that night we went to bed and we woke up the next morning due to go on to the BBC. And I just remember the phone was ringing and ringing. And I said, "Emma, answer the phone." And she did. And I remember it vividly. It was a news reporter live on the radio across India. He just said, "Are you the children of Ranjit Singh Power?" And we said, "Yes, have you found him?" And they said, "We found him, but you know that your father's been murdered." And we found his body. And I still can just picture the shriek of my sister that morning. And I knew from that moment life was changed for good. But more than anything, I guess what I wasn't ready for is the weight that fell on my shoulders in the Indian side of the family. As the son, I now had to step up.
Yeah. Well, it's so many different things that must have been going on. The absolute shock and your hope just smashed. And then, yeah, as you say, now you're the man of the family or the head of the family.
Exactly. And I still remember the next day the police came to see me and they said, and I don't share this often, but they said, "Are you leading the investigation?" And I said, "Of course." We were in the Foreign Office. I got everybody around the table and they said, "Do you know how long this will take?" I guess you ask anybody the question, how long does an international murder investigation take? I don't know, a couple of years or who knows? They said, "Look, this is going to take 5 to 10 years of your life to fight." And I just kind of did the math of thinking like, wow, 23 to 33, this is a big chapter in my life. And 6 years on next week, still ongoing.
Yeah.
So
because
it's still
you
happening.
brought the body home, what you thought was the body home, and it wasn't the body.
Exactly. And I mean, for all of this information was the 31st of May, 2015. And they'd identified a body. And for months, we had to go through challenges and legal systems to try and repatriate the body back to the UK. Anybody who's dealt with India knows it can be complex many times. And so we finally flew the body back and arranged a funeral. But this is now, you're pushing on to kind of June, July time. It took months. And I remember the body arrived into Heathrow Airport and the police just called me and I'd just gone back to work and I wanted some normality. And they said, "We need to see you now, come into the station." And they turned around, they said, look, the body's at Heathrow Airport and the coroner's identified it's not your father. And so, one, the biggest piece of a murder investigations puzzle was lost. But two, more than anything, the closure
Yeah.
of saying goodbye to somebody was gone forever.
And also someone else is missing a body as well, if they sent a body in the wrong place. And have you ever
Exactly.
found your father's body in this
No,
time?
and just on that first note of the body whose it was, we don't know who that was, but we made sure they were given a respectful funeral in the United Kingdom, and at peace. But no, we haven't. And it's a very challenging investigation that is ongoing today, with people yet to be held accountable,
Yeah.
because it's very complex.
Well, I imagine you must have many questions, and you must know that you may never get the answers.
Exactly, and I've accepted that.
Yeah.
It's challenging, and I've worked through it. I've had many great therapists, and you go through these battles of having to get a death certificate, but you can't get one, so you have to get a presumption of death certificate. And I remember I went away for a weekend to Barcelona alone, almost like my weekend to come to terms with that there will never be a body. Yeah, so you have to deal with grief in a very interesting way.
So how did that all impact on you, and how did you, recover from that and come to terms?
I think over the last few years, or the years on from losing my dad, so many things started to hit me. I lost 6 more family members in 3 years.
Oh.
I lost all grandparents. My cousin was killed. I lost an aunt and an uncle suddenly, and these things just kept hitting me. And every time I was like, I'll just keep bouncing back, as you said, stronger. I just thought, what is going on in my life? And then financially, I lost everything of my dad's, and that's court battles at 24 and 25. I was up against people, and I just let it all go. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to press reset, and I'm just going to start again. And I didn't think I'd have to do that at 24. I did. And
Yes, when most people are really just starting and you're having to start again.
I know, that's what I thought. And I thought, again, you might not have any money, but you've got a brain, and let's engage it, and let's be smart. And that's where I've gone. So I realized early on I had to look after myself. I was heavily into the gym, heavily into my counseling. I didn't drink any alcohol. I went running a lot, had an amazing girlfriend at the time, a brilliant support network. Those who know me know that I always refuse to be beaten. And as long as I'm breathing, I will keep on moving. And I guess there's also an element of anger from that past, of how death was, that's driven me forward.
Yes, so much loss, really, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's a lot of loss. And I believe you also found meditation, which kind of changed things for you as well, didn't it? When you were away, was it in New York?
Yeah, that was, so just jumping to the New York, because one minute I've got no money and then we go to New York. So
As you do.
That was a very saved up trip, because there was just to come back on that firstly, there were times when I really struggled to afford my lunch in the city. And, it just reminds me of, we can work with people, we judge them from the outside for looking all slick and smart, but you don't know what they're going through.
Absolutely.
And meditation, there's just before the New York thing, actually, I was in the office at PwC one day. The media were outside, the police were in the building. This was when there was a mix-up of the body. And it was just exhausting. And it was my manager who said, Gian, you've got to pause. Like, you're going to break. And I was like, I'll never be broken. I will keep on going. And they said, look, go to the toilet. And they gave me their phone. It sounds really weird. And they said, just go in there, sit down, put the seat down, sit on the cubicle or whatever, close the door and listen to this. And I thought, what the bloody hell is this? And it was a 10-minute meditation on YouTube. I'd never done this. But at that moment, I was like, I'll take anything. And so I put these headphones in, and after 10 minutes in a situation that was so overwhelming, so daunting, and so fueled with anxiety, I was so calm. And I dealt with the police, I dealt with the media, one after the other, because if I didn't deal with them, other people would step in against me in the media. And so meditation has become a daily habit that's helped me remain calm when needed.
Well, centers you really, doesn't it, and ground you. And I think if we're grounded and centered, then we can make better decisions really from a more connected in place, really, isn't it?
Definitely.
So you recognize that not only you have a story, but that a lot of people have stories of overcoming adversity, and you decided to leave your secure job and start TLC Lions.
I did, and that was a huge leap. But the context was that I was at PwC, and just to rewind, the day that I came back to work, my story was out there in the media. So when people say, "How did you share your story?" I didn't have to take that courageous step because it
Yes.
was there. But on my first day back, everything changed for me because a colleague of mine at the firm, he ended his life by suicide from our building. And it was a huge wake up call for me to get some support, to know that I had to speak up about thoughts that were in my mind. And in doing so, I saw that people started to share with me.
Yeah.
And more across the firm, senior, junior, stories were coming out. And I just thought, these stories need to be used more. Storytelling, as I always say, doesn't make us less professional, they make us more human. They create
Absolutely.
amazing bonds in teams. And I wanted to awaken this emotion in the corporate world and to ignite empathy across a traditional corporate setting. And I stayed there for a few more years. One, because I needed the income, and two, I finished off my qualification, which was bloody hard.
It
Didn't want to
is.
fall behind my exams at the same time
It's
as
the
the
one where you
case.
have to pass every single exam. If not, you redo them all again.
Yeah, and if you
That's
fail one, you
tough.
get fired.
Yeah.
And
Oof.
honestly, on that, 'cause I never get to speak about this, but I will never forget the stress of those exams. There was one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and I was having to deal with the police and the media between the exams when everyone else was
Yeah.
revising.
So alone on themselves, they are very stressful. But yeah, mixed in with all of
Yeah,
that is just 1,000% harder.
that's it. And so, yeah, I started to realize the power of storytelling, and I knew this had to be done. And so I love the science of storytelling and what happens when we share stories. And so I left to launch TLC Lions, and I wanted to bring together these ordinary people with extraordinary stories around the globe who could impact the corporate world for the better. And
And
that's
I
what I was
love
born.
that Lions is based on yours and your father's middle name, because my dad was called Leo and his Hebrew
Ah,
name is Aryeh, which also means lion. So we
oh,
both have a
really?
lion of a
Oh,
father. So that's very lovely. But yeah, lion, my dad was tiny, but he had a massive heart. And that's what we think of as lions, really, don't we?
yeah. Oh, no, it's amazing. And just courageous, and you got to roar when you've got to roar as well.
Absolutely. So tell us about starting TLC and your idea that you had.
Yeah, so I just had this idea, and naturally things evolve. But I knew that I realized everyone had a story, and I wanted them to be shared in the corporate world. And so initially, I went out finding these individuals known as our lions. Um, and then a lot of my background is corporate. So I thought, can I bring them together and they could share a story and it will really create this ripple effect? The reality was that I left PwC with £500 and I had rent to pay the next month. And I was like, what am I doing? And moved into a tiny box room with no heating. And I bought a whiteboard for £17 and I just wrote and I wrote and I wrote a plan. And at the same point then, in October 2017, Deloitte produced a report for the government on mental health in the workplace. And so I read it the day it came out. I emailed the authors, I met them for coffee the next day. And then it all just escalated and until our launch and then our first event in 2018.
And how many speakers do you have now?
So we have 35 around the world.
Yes, it's not just UK based. You literally, I watched you over on
Yeah,
LinkedIn, which is where we first connected, and they're popping up all over the place.
they are. We have in Beijing, in South Africa, across the US, in Atlanta, in Vermont, in New York, and most recently coming on board in Madrid. I'm in South America, which just shows that, like, as you know, stories just cross languages and cultures. Everybody has one, and
Absolutely.
I love them.
Well, they're hundreds and hundreds of years old, and we think of people sitting around a fireside. This is how traditions, get passed down. All the history of people is through storytelling. When I first shared my own personal story, it was about 7 years ago. It was with the Forgiveness Project in London, and our founder is an amazing woman, Marina Cantacuzino, and she doesn't call us storytellers; she calls us story healers. And I just think that fits with your company as
Mm.
well, that the healing that comes when we hear stories, it's quite incredible. Where do you think your own resilience to bounce forward has come from?
One actually from my mum and dad, I have to say, because my dad was always incredibly strong-minded, well, physically and mentally strong, and my mum is the most inspiring woman I know in my life. She's just incredible. Um, it's a hard question. I just think life is so awesome, and I've always felt very fortunate to still be here. And every single day I wake up, and I feel like you do get one life, and I'm going to appreciate every single day. And people are going to try and dampen my parade, and there's going to be dark moments, but I just refuse to be knocked down. And it is hard, and I do cry. I cry on the regular, but I just want to keep going. And something that's always fired me is I will always stand up for other people,
Yes.
which will probably get me into trouble one day on the street or something.
So
But
the injustice that people feel, you feel
yeah,
very strongly about that.
very. If I hear a waiter being spoken down to by somebody, I have to step in. If
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I will always step up for other people, and I feel there's a duty there.
Absolutely, because we are all, in my eyes anyway, and maybe not other people's, as you've witnessed, I think we're all just people. It doesn't matter what your status, your job, every one of us are just as important as the next person.
100%.
Yeah. So what is the future now with your Lions? Where do you see it going?
Yeah, so we launched in the US in September last year, so it's all kind of full systems go in America. Then we launched in France on the 1st of March, which is really exciting. So there are the plan is to launch in 4 more locations in the next 18 months. If
And by
things
the
all
time
go.
this interview goes out, because we're interviewing in April, but more than likely won't be out till about September, October, we will have discovered where else you're going to be.
Exactly. But there's parts of Europe and Asia and other areas. So that's the key thing really. It's growing what we do in other areas of the world because storytelling knows no boundaries and
Absolutely.
the corporate world needs it.
Yeah, and are there some countries that are more resistant to you coming in speaking about mental health? You know, the different cultures, different backgrounds.
Yes, 100% yes. I mean, France, we've launched there. It is worlds away from the UK and the US. And people say, why did you go there? And exactly because of what we just said, there is an injustice, and I want people to have a voice. It's easy for me to just say, let's go to Canada and Australia, but actually people in France needed a voice, whether we look at inclusion issues or mental health. And I get clients over there, and I don't point fingers because we're all on a journey, who will say, Gian, by the way, can you lines not mention the word mental health? And so I always politely challenge, but appreciate where they are and where we want to get to. So that's just here, let alone when
Yes.
I deal with India, my culture.
Yeah, it's interesting. A couple of years ago, I stopped working as a psychotherapist, and the centre where I used to work, they put up a sign and it said counselling centre, and a client complained. She didn't want people to know that's where she was going when she walked through that door, and it was taken down. And I think this is Glasgow, and there's still a stigma about going for therapy. Yeah, I thought they should have left it up personally and discussed it in their session about why it was an issue. But yeah, India will be an interesting place to start.
That's it. But I think on this topic, and I find this in the UK, if I speak or one of our lions of a certain race or ethnicity does, people flock.
Yes.
And they are like, they just start opening up because like, oh my God, he gets me, he gets my culture. And I know at home people are limited on their voice. There's no word for mental health across the
Yeah.
Indian languages. So we've got a long way to go, but I will challenge Indian corporates.
Yeah, and it's also, they don't really speak about mental health, but I imagine the conditioning, and the culture of many societies, especially India, must be so hard to really break that conditioning. As you know, I'm also a sexual violence activist, so their opinions and attitudes towards women, even the mothers and the sisters, where you brought it on yourself, you've brought shame on the family, and you think, oh, how do we undo this conditioning?
I know, and it's a challenge. It really is. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I guess essentially the message from all of your lions and lionesses is that life is for living, and if we choose to, we can really get past anything, and that's what you show.
That's it. I mean, I get inspiration from everyone and anyone. I love to learn from everybody. But yeah, meeting the lions, and whenever I brought them together, especially at Christmas parties in the past, when we always get together in December, I think people might think, oh, wow, they're such intense stories, but they're the happiest people I know because they've learned what happiness is. And it's such a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
And they radiate positivity, and I just lap it up.
Well, as you know, I know some of your lions, and one of my dearest friends is the lovely Liz Cashin, who listeners may have heard her episode with me, and you would never know her past. I mean, to me, she just radiates gold, just goodness, and she's just a beauty. And I know she'll be cringing if she listens to this when I hear that. But I think we wouldn't know the light unless we'd seen the darkest of times. And
Exactly.
and it really wakes us up in life, doesn't it?
It does.
And I often think, well, what would I be if I hadn't experienced the trauma that I experienced? Would I still be asleep, walking through my life on autopilot like a lot of my friends are? And again, that's not with judgment. It's just, trauma can shoot an arrow into your heart.
Yeah, it does. I've learned so much. And I remember a few years ago, this event on stage, somebody brought up about what's happened. And I said, as you just said, it's taught me so much. Lessons I could not have dreamed of. And I will always see the positives. And by saying you see the positives in your father's murder might confuse people.
Yes.
But I can't change the past. I can only learn from it.
Yeah, and that's so important, isn't it? As much as we want to, when we get really caught and wanting to not believe it, that's just hoping and wishing it was something different. But when we can really accept it, it's, I can't change it. So what would you say your greatest lessons in all of this has been?
I think I've learned the importance of time and how precious time is. Whatever I do with my time, because I can't always get more of it. I can only appreciate what I have. And I put my family first. No business meeting will ever come before my mum or my niece or my nephew. I appreciate memories, or moments rather, because I know they'll just become memories one day. And I think it's really put that at top of my radar. And if there's something that I really want to do, I'm going to do it, because my dad didn't expect to go at 55. I hope that I'll live till 90, who knows?
And when you say that, that's the age that I am. So to me, it feels far too young.
Exactly. So live every single day, just be a good, kind person, and go to bed with a smile.
Yeah. So if anyone that's listening, I hope they haven't been in a similar situation, but maybe someone's struggling with grief, or, what advice, what tips would you give that have really helped you the most to get through the dark days?
I think one thing I did is I wrote a list, this is really basic, of just things that bring me joy. Seriously bring me joy, because I know that there's always a vacuum, there's a hole where my dad has gone, and these holes keep hitting us. And so I try to fill that with the things that bring me joy, and I wrote them down. I realized most of them don't cost a penny. Spending time with my loved ones, going for a walk, watching a sunset. And I just think finding those inner moments that bring me joy have really helped me in dark times, and they still do.
And that's a little bit like your meditation, isn't it? When we sit and watch a sunset, it connects us in, doesn't it? And when we take time to be with the ones that love us and we love, it also it's nourishment for our soul, isn't it?
That's it. And I think the final thing, after the dark times, I'm like, just be you. I love people who are just so expressive of who they are, and I think it's just amazing how unique everybody is, and just let your personality out.
Absolutely.
I think it's just a brilliant way of being.
It's you can just feel the joy in you actually coming off, even though we're doing this in Zoom and not in person, coming off the screen, just spending time with you. It's lovely. So where can people find out more about you, Gian?
Well, you can find me at Gian Power, Gian Power. On, I guess, LinkedIn is a bit more formal, Instagram is a bit more behind the scenes, bits and pieces on YouTube, but generally if you Google that, there is another one actually, so don't get confused, but I made friends with him in Australia.
Oh really? You found another one with the same?
Yeah.
That's funny, isn't
he's
it?
the original, because he's older as well. But at Gian Power.
Oh well, it just really remains me to thank you so much for taking time out and coming on the show and sharing your story with us.
Unbroken, healing through storytelling.